James Green, and I'm Everett Polinski, and I'm here to talk about the Irkutsk Ice Truckers story. Irkutsk Ice Truckers, which I presume you know about if you're watching this video, has been an off-and-on 7-year-long project operating since fall of 2018. But for many of you, you might hear the name, you might have seen our articles, but you might not know who our mysterious co-founder, Everett Polinski, is, why we're called Irkutsk Ice Truckers. Like, what does that name even mean? You might also wonder why we seem to oddly stop writing things for long periods of time and oddly start again. And for any of you, if you wondered about any of these questions, I'm just here to talk a little about the story of Irkutsk Ice Truckers, who we are, what our name is, why we started over, and where we might be going. So let's go through it again. I'm James Green, and I'm also Everett Polinski. Everett Polinski is the name that appears most of all on our site, but Everett Polinski is, I'm sorry to tell you, a pseudonym. Everett doesn't exist. I'm Everett, and I'm James, and my real name is James. So how did that happen? Everett is not a name I made up. 7 years ago, when I was a student at Wyoming Catholic College, when I was a freshman there, everyone checked their email in a common computer room in the middle of our library. I never intended on writing satire at that time. I never imagined where I'd be within a few months or, well, a few years with the site that we're operating. I was just a student. So I walked in one day to the library to check my email, and I, as I'd actually done multiple times, forgot to log off. Normally that shouldn't be a problem in a Catholic institution like Wyoming Catholic College. Surely no one would use that mistake to their advantage. And surely nothing would come of it. That's what I thought, but I was to be mistaken. As the next day, I checked my email again and found this message had been written from my email account. Dearest all, I regret to inform you that I will not be continuing my education at this school due to bad personal decisions and disciplinary reasons. You might be wondering about what I was reprimanded for. You can ask Miss Halsmer and Mr. Tontwich if you want, as I am legally bound not to disclose why. It has always been my dream to start an ice road trucking company from Anchorage to Irkutsk. Irkutsk, by the way, is a city in Russia. Fortuitously, I'm now a wealthy man, so I've got the money. Anyone who wants to join me can send an email at my new address. Don't use my old name. Everett.Polinski@IrkutskIceTruckers.com. Farewell. Everett, formerly James. So I, an 18-year-old student, not with any particular intentions of doing anything, just your average Catholic student, thought, how dare someone do this to me? And of course, being the person I was in the lack of perfect charity, as of course we all are, I thought, I've got to get back at whoever did this prank to me, whoever told everyone at the school. This email, by the way, had been sent to all the students, I guess all the freshmen, but it kind of made its way to apparently all the other students at this small college. And it was an email that was saying I'm leaving, that I'm changing my name, that I'm founding a business. And I'm like, well, my first reaction was, sorry everyone, someone wrote this email from my email during dinner. Please disregard it. I am not leaving. But my second inclination was, I can't just let them have their prank on me. I gotta get back. So I started thinking, well, I can get the email address, everett.polinski@irkutskiceTruckers.com. After I did a little research, I found I could get that email address for 1 year for $1. So I thought, why don't I actually get this email, try to figure out who pranked me, and use that email to try to prank them back by emailing from this email to them. I ultimately found out who wrote it. It's an aside, I won't blame them. That guy actually at one point contributed a little to the later project that ultimately became the Irkutsk Ice Truckers website. But I got the email, wrote a few things back and forth to certain of the people who I found to be responsible. But I ultimately realized I own this web domain. I own it for a year. I paid a whole $1 for it. Why don't I try to figure out some way to use it? And like, because if you own a domain for an email, you can also easily use it to run a website. Did a little more research, figured out how to start a website, and I created IrkutskIceTruckers.com. Per the announcement email, I was like, this is supposed to be an ice trucking company running an ice business. Ice trucking is trucks that drive on frozen ice to cross frozen rivers and reach remote communities in Siberia and Alaska. And I think, well, let's make a website that's like the website for this business, because I've already paid $1 for this. Why don't I make a website? So I create it. I put like pages on, here's our trucking route. You can fill out this form to get request us to pick up your load and take it from the city to that city, or etc. So I open the site, start putting business update posts on it, and then I start thinking, well, I'm still a student at this college. This is kind of fun to run a website. Why don't I start covering the news that happens at Wyoming Catholic College? Why don't I cover like this storm wrestled the people from this storm? Let me talk about the news of the outcome of this intramural football game. Why don't I cover the fact that a deer bounced off of a professor's car during a field science outing expedition trip? Why don't I cover the wild story of what had happened by that point to me and some of my friends on the introductory 3-week backpacking expedition? Why don't I actually not just tell the story, but kind of make it a little more fun? Why don't I try to exaggerate it a little? And since this new character name, Everett Polinski, has been created, why don't I write everything on the website as if it was written by Everett Polinski? So throughout fall of 2018, I just start writing random things. I eventually think up the idea that there's this character name, Everett Polinski. It's been created by this person who, again, wrote the email from my account. Why don't I use that name and pretend that he is a student at Wyoming Catholic College? Why don't I start writing papers in his name? But of course, I didn't have the time or discipline to write a real paper in the name of Everett Polinski. So I thought, why don't I just write a satirical paper? So I started actually in theology. We were studying Old Testament at that time, and I just, on the day that we were supposed to submit our regular papers, I of course submitted my regular paper to the professor, Dr. Liznowski. Can't remember what my real one was on, but I also added to the stack a short, I'll say fake paper, because it was satirical and humorous. It was kind of a mishmash, I think, of stuff we had been studying in humanities about the Iliad, and using that as a metaphor to understand Jacob in the Old Testament. And I titled the paper, Jacob Was a Bad Dude. And just submitted it. The professor wrote back. He talked about it in the next class as one of his favorite papers he had written. He just loved the satirical nature I had put forward in this. He actually thought it had been written by another friend of mine who was running skits, who was probably a lot more funny than I was, and, well, to a degree, still is. He thought it had been written by him. And so I thought, well, success. This is just fun. Let me write some more. So I submitted another paper. I can't remember what the second one was on. It was, I think, something to do with field science and all of the 20 different geological layers in a canyon nearby the college. And I put that in to our field science class on the date that we were supposed to submit papers for that class. But at this point, I'm like, well, I don't want to just have the professors read them. I want to start putting these on the website too. So in addition to covering the little banal little facts of little things that were going on in the community, Catholic College, I'm like, why don't I just start writing satirical, kind of twisted, laughing papers and put them up on the website too. This carried me over to spring of 2019, spring semester, and I like start mixing these two ideas of let's cover the news of like these little things that happen at Wyoming Catholic College, but let's kind of exaggerate it. Let's I'm just gonna share this tab over here to show what the website was looking like in spring of 2019. But I start writing things like senior involved in phone trafficking attempt. This is funny given that at Wyoming Catholic College, students are allowed to have cell phones. So I'm like, well, phone trafficking is like the serious investigative reporting type news story. That this would be a thing going on. Or I talk about hotel vacuum brings joy as it stays found. This was a satirical thing related to work I was doing at the college and the fact that I could never find the vacuums I needed to do the work I was doing. I actually create a page on the website called Metal Match, meant to be a dating site. There's a whole other side on why it's called that, but I actually had a friend who's an upperclassman at the time, who I talked to all the time, write something himself, kind of making fun of the fact that students normally didn't return dishes to the cafeteria where they were supposed to. I just kind of write these little absurd things about what little things that were going on in college. Not really good satire by that point, but stuff that people within the community liked. And that carried me over throughout most of spring of 2019. That summer got a little better, and I started thinking, well, why don't I not just cover things within the WCC community? Why don't I talk a little bit about satirical things happening in the church as a whole? Then I wrote something that was actually my first piece that really got big, called Sponsored Pre-Mass Announcements. And this one got shared by Dr. Peter Kwasniewski to a bunch of his followers, blew up, comparatively speaking, for me, it blew up in the sense of getting hundreds of reads and comments, and Dr. Kwasniewski, the famed liturgical writer, writing to me. I basically made fun in this article of the announcements before Mass and how they're kind of an interruption and parishes to the attitude you should have through Mass. And I say, well, why doesn't a parish try making them sponsored? Why don't they try making people pay for advertising space within this time? It was with this article that I realized, wow, this could actually go bigger. There's actually something really fun to do here. Throughout that summer, I started developing the character of Everett Polinski a bit more. Early artificial intelligence, computer-generated images were available that summer. I found a website called thispersondoesnotexist.com, which creates artificial faces that completely don't belong to any real person. I went through with that site for a little while. I found a face that seemed to fit the character I developed of Everett Polinski, who at this point was his own character. I took this picture, edited it into pictures of various things happening around the college, and I just started putting more things about Everett and his life as being the chief editor of what at this point was no longer a ice trucking business site, but had morphed into being a satire site. At this point, I called it News from Lander to the World, and it just started covering college things still, but a bunch of political things like Biden makes pitch to potential voters in swing cemeteries. It covered additional church politics things, again, kind of connecting them to things at WCC. Like I made a claim that a few particular students at WCC had been the ones who tossed the Pachamama statues, which were happening that fall, into the Tiber River. And it just started growing. For additional friends of mine started submitting their own pieces. And by fall of 2019, we were probably going at a pace of about a piece every day, an article every day. I was spending probably an hour or two every day writing satire, developing other things on the website, which I'll again show. Probably won't go through everything, but it developed all of these side pages. We, at that point, published a compilation of our first 6 months worth of articles as a book. I won't go into the name. There's another silly story behind that. But we had developed, again, pages about ice trucking. We were still kind of pretending to be a site about a ice trucking company, and that was still supposedly part of Everett's backstory, was that he was this guy who ran an ice trucking business. But we again just kind of became this all-in-one site for things happening at the college, publishing news and satire pieces every day. Carried on through the fall of 2019, and then into the spring of 2020, I decided to produce another site. This one shared over here. I found I could get the Wikipedia software, run it on a subdomain off of the domain that at this point I owned, and create what I called Wikipedia the WCC Encyclopedia. I've since shut this thing down. I think it went a little too far in terms of putting too much personal information, but we got at one point hundreds of articles about every single little detail of anything that happened at WCC. Any person, place, building, event had its own kind of page and what it is. And we started, for this site, developing the backstory behind what eventually became more than just the character of Everett, which I have a giant page on. I'll look to show a little of the backstory I developed about him. But at this point, we had several other characters. We had a editing assistant named Sophia Donaldson. We had another writer that we named Marcus Gardner. Again, these were all fake names used by me and some of the other collaborators on the project. And we not only were writing articles in their name, but we were also writing the backstory. For Everett's sake, by this point, we had developed this huge, grandiose backstory that I, throughout the spring, was also trying to write a novel about. The novel went nowhere. I mean, I wrote 60 pages, but I did not and still don't know how to write dialogue. But we developed this grand backstory. We developed this grand kind of conspiracy that Everett, as a character writing the website, was also supposedly kind of involved with in real life. So our satire took on kind of a edge of mystery and conspiracy, and that a lot of our satirical pieces were referencing little things in this backstory we developed about Everett being connected to some NASA, CIA conspiracy that involved the college. We started creating pages about the relatives of these people we had developed and starting to create this whole backstory around Everett. And it was at this point that was probably the peak in terms of time spent. Again, I was probably spending 2 hours a day on writing various things for this. I had come out with another compilation book of later work, eventually even larger one here of our articles and projects. And of course, this being during COVID time, we wrote many, I think, our best pieces parodying things that had happened in regard to COVID, such as, like, I wrote school to introduce single-use doorknobs, or pumpkin spice coronavirus variant. warned about by CDC. And as summer turned to fall, we went beyond the web to start kind of what I'll say introducing our work into real life. We started making posters about things connected to the characters, putting them all around the college. And won't go into them, but there were various ways in which it kind of went a little overboard, both in terms of time spent and in terms of attitude, where I was like having too much fun to think about what I was even doing or why I was doing it. That continued into spring of 2021, where an article I'd written that was connected to kind of a political scandal in town. I say got connected to political scandals. The person I wrote about, who had actually asked me to write this, was connected to local politics, as I was getting local readership as well in the town of Lander at the time. Made one of the pieces I'd written about this local guy go kind of viral in terms of thousands of views. And this was one of the weirdest points where a Wyoming online newspaper cited something I had written about this guy as fact. The supposed claim that this local guy was building a skyscraper in the small 7,000 person town of Lander, and they used this as a further attack on the guy. So this was a point at which, I already had put warning labels on the website of like, warning, this is satire, but I had to put even more and start being a little more careful. And I eventually realized by that summer, this is taking a lot of time. I had just finished my junior year, and I'm like, I want to actually focus on studying. I want to actually focus on the reason why I'm here as a student. And I decided by June of 2021, why don't I just stop? But when you're doing something this large, you can't just stop. When you have a huge backstory behind a character, you got to have an in-universe, a kind of in-story, in-character reason for why you're stopping. So I had to think of one, and I came up with, what if our character, Everett Polinski, the chief editor behind Irkutsk Ice Truckers, what if he got expelled from WCC, from Wyoming Catholic College? What if he got expelled, he failed, he ran out of money, and he ran off to be a hippie in the wilderness or something? So I actually created all those articles, a couple articles explaining that IIT is over, our founder got expelled, our founder she ran off into the mountains, hasn't been seen in a while, and therefore IIT will be over. And this gave me the excuse to stop. Through fall of 2021, during my senior year at Wyoming Catholic College, we were thus pretty much on pause, because it was just too much for me to keep up, while at the same time being a good student. The spring of 2022, I think I did one or two articles. Can't even really remember what they were on, but we were way down from our previous one per day to maybe one or two a semester. And it was this was a fun thing I did during college. Why don't I just stop? But during summer of 2022, in connection with political events that happened summer, why don't I write a bit more? I graduated. I ended up working for the college that summer, and what later turned into another 2 years of working for them after I graduated. And I have a bit more time. Why don't I bring this back? And so I restarted. I had to have an in-universe explanation for how we restarted, which was basically that Everett somehow was found, that someone had hacked to the website and falsely taken it over and away from Everett, and that never fear, Everett is back now. We're going to start. And so throughout fall of 2022 and spring of 2023, I'm we're back. We're back in a small scale, maybe one thing every 2 weeks. And I had some really good articles during that period. A lot more kind of political focused and church focused than school focused. But it was this is a small thing that a small group of people reads, and we'll go there. But at that point in summer of 2023, fall of 2023, I was recently, and discerning your religious vocation. Kind of still hopefully am. There's a little bit of personal confusion over where I am as a real person going, but I was like, I need to actually stop this. So I started creating another set of in-universe reasons for why IIT was stopping. Actually never finished this supposed 10-part final saga of some massive conspiracy that IIT was itself a conspiracy. It was supposed to be this like 10-part expose that would eventually get you to the end of IIT isn't a real person, or sorry, Everett is not a real person, and that IIT is this government plot, or I think I was ultimately going to argue that it was like a Jesuit plot or something by the end to mess with Catholics' perception of reality. And it was supposed to be this way where I could kind of end the whole saga and tie up all the kind of loose ends we had throughout the past years of what had at this point been 750 articles. Just kind of explain what it was all about and end with this giant, massive unveiling expose. And that was end of 2023, spring of 2024. But the summer of 2024 had a little bit of a setback on what I thought was going to be an imminent entrance into religious life. I'm still personally very confused over where I am going in that respect. So seriously, please do pray for me. Throughout the fall of 2024, I decided to try to write not satire, but kind of real things, real reflections, to try to see whether I have any sort of future in academia, like in anything more intellectual, because those were the confusions that were floating me at that point. I spent most of the fall and still am writing thoughts about politics, theology, and spiritual life at grainofwheat.substack.com. But it was during this time period that I thought, well, why don't I also, because I'm still out in this world and apparently still will be for a while, why don't I bring back Irkutsk Ice Truckers again? And so for the third time, IIT came back. Everett Polinski was pulled back out again, and I started publishing articles again. At this point, I was no longer working for Wyoming Catholic College. I was doing a mix of things, including running my own business. So I was just at this point covering church news. And this is where the IIT that you now probably are finding, if you're new to us, is now hosted. We're now at irkutskice.substack.com, and we're pretty much mostly covering just church news, a little bit of politics. But as soon as I brought it over to Substack, the Substack platform, we became more popular than we'd ever been before when Dr. Kwasniewski, again, thank you for your help in supporting us and sharing some of our articles. Like we got to, I think, our most popular article ever with Diocese banishes Latin Mass to undersea cave, accessible only by scuba gear, as well as our Trump announces tariffs in Novus Ordo was also really popular. And once I started getting incredible readership, bigger than we'd ever had before when we had a dedicated site, I'm like, okay, well, we'll keep going. It seems that people like this. It seems that people want this. There have been Catholic satire sites before. Dr. Kwasniewski himself was associated with one that is kind of defunct. Like, I'm not exactly sure what happened to it. It was like, you can find it only on the Internet Archive right now, and they had really, really great pieces when they were operating. There was another place called Eye of the Tiber, I believe. They haven't published anything in about 5 years. So with both of those being gone, I haven't really found any other dedicated Catholic satire sites. I feel like I have an impetus to keep going as long as I'm still out here in the world. And for now, that's kind of my plan, is to continue kind of writing things mostly from a traditional Catholic view, not a extremely so one. but just kind of satirizing the things that to a real degree are absurd within the church, that are kind of absurd within politics. Because it seems to me that through satire, you can kind of reach a cathartic realization of things as they are. That, like, through exaggerating a little bit, you can actually see things as they are more clearly, and kind of in doing so, reach a little bit of an increase in hope, in not like submitting to evil in a despairing way, but almost laughing at, maybe I shouldn't have said evil, but at least laughing at the failures and flaws and things around us as a way for kind of growing in hope. I don't have a really well developed theory of satire or of humor. Again, I kind of wandered into this project, never really making giant plans, and I still don't really have giant plans over what we're about or where this is headed. Like, I, again, personally hope that before too long I will be set down a path towards a religious vocation. I'm in a little bit of a period of personal, I don't know if I should say turmoil, but confusion regarding that due to some tensions in me between kind of the more academic, intellectual side that is the charism of certain orders that I've been directed to, and also a desire for the simplicity of the contemplative praying work of others, which is why I was kind of turned down when I made a series of serious visits to some Benedictines last summer. But in the state that I am, we're just going to keep on writing things. From comments I've received, I think we'll focus mostly on church things from now on. Of course, with a little bit of political overtones, like anything that mentions Trump is just kind of funny no matter what you say. But mostly church focused, probably mostly in text format, like not making videos, and we'll be on irkutskice.substack.com. I'm going to continue, because it's hopefully helping me to figure out where I should be headed, writing serious articles on grainofwheat.substack.com. So I'd encourage you all, if you read my satire and like it, to check out irkutskice.substack.com. Sorry, grainofwheat.substack.com for serious thoughts on what turns out to kind of be a half and half mixture of talking about politics, a little bit about talking about the spiritual life, and theology, prayer life, kind of all with an overtone of René Girard's theory of mimesis that I discovered through a couple other people I listened to, and it really seems to be the key, along with John 12:24 and an understanding of charity. Like, those two things together are kind of the two tools that I use to analyze things in politics and in theology. So again, I'd urge you to check out grainofwheat.substack.com. And yeah, that's who we are. So sorry if it was a disappointment, everyone, to realize that Everett Polinski is not real. I mean, in a certain way, he is real. I'm him, but sorry for the disappointment. Sorry also for the disappointment if you thought we were a real news site. I'm sorry to say that extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion were not defunded by the defunding of USAID. Fortunately, that will take a little more personal work at your own parish to defund/eliminate them. And also, if you were worried about other things, such as article last night, like the mass race, Cardinal Roche has not announced that, for all that I know. So we are satire. I know many people leave comments thinking that we're real, and I don't know how to persuade you that we're satire when I've already added a bunch of warning labels all over the site, and I think our headlines are by themselves pretty obviously satire. So for all you who are wondering, we are satire. Everett is not real. Everett is me. We're going to continue to use him for some articles as a pseudonym. Say we, I will use him. I may have additional people brought back to the website. Again, it's mainly been me for the last bit of time, but we're just going to keep going from there. So again, thank you for watching. This is the Irkutsk Ice Truckers story. I'm James Green, and I'm Everett Polinski. Have a good day, and God bless.